On the international front, the United States foreign policy has turned into a crude carrot and stick policy, which is disrupting the agreements built after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Those who are ideologically close to his administration, such as Javier Milei in Argentina, receive economic and political support. By contrast, under the pretext of combating the illegal trafficking of drugs, Donald Trump has threatened to bomb Mexico and Colombia, and everything points to an imminent intervention in Venezuela. We're also witnessing an assault on democracy to the extent we have never seen before. Donald Trump has systematically attacked dissenters, and no social group have escaped his wrath. Political parties, the press, unions, NGOs, and academia have been methodologically targeted by his administration. Expressing different ideas could lead to political persecution, as journalists who were silenced found out, to cuts of funding, as exemplified by elite universities that receive fewer federal resources, or to the revocation of visas, as many graduate students realize. In my personal evaluation, when I saw that Donald Trump had been reelected, I understood that the world was about to face turbulent times. However, I also believe that American society had strong counterbalances to mitigate its most disturbing ideas. Strong judicial and legislative powers, world-leading universities, a relatively informed civil society, and a thriving free press will shield American society and the world from his more authoritarian tendencies. Today, after having witnessed the last year, I am not sure that the United States democracy is as strong as I thought. In these dark times, we are fortunate to have Professor Gerald Friedman sharing his insights about the implication of Donald Trump's re-election for the world. Professor Friedman holds a PhD in economics from Harvard University. He's a distinguished economist and historian specializing in labor economics, economic history, political economy, and healthcare policy. With over 4 decades at UMass Amherst, he's renowned for his rigorous analysis of labor movements, slavery in the Americas, and progressive economic reforms, including single-payer healthcare system. His work has influenced national policy debates, not only through economic modeling for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, projecting significant job growth and income boost from the proposed policies. Professor Friedman, thank you for your generosity. We give you the word.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. And yes, you put the hammer on the nail. Donald Trump is a global threat. And in my analysis that I'll be presenting here, I want to put it in a historic context. The United States has always had these authoritarian tendencies. And what has changed, and I will be going into a bit more American history than people may be familiar with, but what has happened in the last decades is we have seen the rise of an authoritarian capitalist, pro-capitalist, warmongering right wing in response to the popular movements that had made so much progress in the 1950s through the 1970s. So I will be applying my history background as well as my economics. And let's see, can I move forward to the next slide? Oops, I don't seem to have control here. Oh, is that it? Do I go? Oh, there we go. We're going. Okay, bottom lines. History. Trump is not an aberration. There's been an ongoing struggle through American history between democracy and autocracy, between slavery and freedom, capitalism, and popular control over the economy. This conflict has been going on throughout. We've gone back and forth with some general drift towards progress. But the last 50 years, the capitalists have been winning the class war. And they've been laying the groundwork for, well, maybe they didn't want Trump in particular, but they have laid the groundwork for Trump by through institutional changes and by undermining faith in democracy. Let's see. How do I move this? Oh, there we go. Okay. How to think about social change. Now, if you grew up reading Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto, and the writings of Lenin and others, you think that conflict comes when the people push forward, and social conflict is unidirectional. But in fact, when you get down to it, the people are the weakest side of class conflict. The capitalists, the landowners, the elites, they are more powerful. So it's always a difficult struggle. That's why we don't have, some socialist utopia. Um, Furthermore, while the people push, the capitalists and the elites, they push back. So we get this back and forth between conflict and counter-conflict, popular movements and reaction. Okay. Moving forward. Is there a button I push to move the slide? Or, there must be some way I can get to the next slide. Is that? There we go. Okay. So here's the history behind Trump's so far successful war on democracy. And I'm going way back. I'm going back to the founding of what became the United States. The United States was founded to support slavery. There was slavery in the Caribbean. That's what the Europeans really, the French and the British really cared about with the slave colonies in the Caribbean. In North America, north of the Rio Grande, what they cared about were the tobacco colonies in Virginia, Maryland, and a little bit in South Carolina. The northern colonies were just to support those slave regimes. Then I want to talk about the pillars of democracy in America. Here I'm drawing on Alexis de Tocqueville, a French scholar, political activist who, after having been involved in some treasonous activities against the king, he came to North America to do to write a book. And James Madison and Karl Marx. Progress and retreat. Periods of abolition, emancipation, the American Civil War, one of the bloodiest conflicts in history, Reconstruction after the Progressive Era around 1900 to 1920, and the New Deal. The Civil Rights Movement, the capitalist reaction against the Civil Rights Movement, and then Trump's attack on everything good. Okay, the history behind Trump's attack on American democracy. Now, he's not the first to attack democracy in the United States. Democracy has been contested throughout the time since the Europeans arrived in North America. Okay, next slide, please. How's it happen? Somehow it's going to happen. There we go. North America was settled by slave owners and their allies. I mean, I can be naive. I actually went through these slides with my wife, and she was like, North America was settled by slave owners and their allies. That was a little bit of an eye-opener to her, and she's an educated, sensible person. But that's the way it is. Yeah, there's a myth that people in the United States like to propound that, oh, they came here for religious freedom, whatever. Yeah, okay, there were people who came here for religious freedom. But most of what they came here for was to have African slaves or to make money by selling things to the owners of African slaves. Building ships to transport African slaves, growing food to feed African slaves so the slaves could just devote their labor to growing sugar, tobacco, and other crops. Um, okay, moving to the next slide. Uh, North America was settled for slave plantations in the South or to support slave plantations. So northern colonies supplied food, transport, financial services to slave plantations in the South and the Caribbean. So you get this business going on, maybe not so much the last few years, but for a while there was a move among universities to um, explore how that the university, like Harvard, was supported by the slave trade. You know, the merchants who funded Harvard or funded Columbia. Um, Brown University was named after a prominent merchant in the slave trade. The area where I live, the Connecticut Valley, the Connecticut River Valley, we grew food which went south to feed slaves. Now, while we were all involved in slavery, the North was different from Virginia or Jamaica because in the North we had a very wide distribution of productive property. There were some merchants who had particularly large ships or owned banks, but mostly it was relatively small, which meant, and farms were family farm managed, which meant that there was a wide, even distribution of productive property, allowing the social basis for democratic governance, democratic white male, but it was democratic compared to the South, where you had a few large planters who owned a large number of slaves and ran the colony. Some of them were relatively nice people, like George Washington, who freed his slaves, Madison, who we'll talk about, who freed his slaves, but they were slave owners. Pillars of democracy. North America became democratic, and this is mostly New England's doing. I live in New England. I went to school in New England. I'm fine with praising New England. Oops. Uh, let's see. Move to the next one. Oh, we seem to be losing ground here. I lost the size. Um, okay. Okay. Democracy, spiritual and and here are two aspects of democracy that have both been undermined during the capitalist class war over the past 50 years. There's the spirit of democracy. Um, Self-interest properly understood, meaning that you develop the sense that you can advance your own interests only by working with other people in a cooperative and respectful manner. This is the real basis for effective democratic governance. People who are used to working together, accept that sometimes you lose, but you keep coming back. You try to persuade other people. Um, and then there are institutions that restrain would-be autocrats. And we've learned in the United States, unfortunately, over the last decade, that those institutions aren't always very effective unless you have this spirit of liberty. And the spirit of liberty is based on a wide distribution of productive property and worker autonomy so that people don't have to do what someone else says in order to maintain their livelihood. So the first is de Tocqueville, the second is Madison, the third is Marx. And all of these have eroded since 1971 in, um, in the capitalist counterattack that opened the door to Trump. Uh, if I move along here, does that help? Nope, nope. Okay, next slide. There we go. Popular basis. This is Judge Learned Hand, a very prominent jurist, a lawyer, judge in New York State in the mid-20th century. The spirit of liberty is a spirit which is not too sure that it is right, always open-minded. The spirit of liberty is a spirit which seeks to understand the minds of other men and women. You understand that other people may be right, so you should listen to them and think about what they said. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias. You think about what is in other people's interests because, in the long run, you know that your interest, your well being is bound up with theirs. The spirit of liberty remembers that not even a sparrow falls to earth unheeded. Pay attention to everybody else's needs and everybody else's advantage, um, because you are part of the community. Slave owners aren't part of the community, mind you. It's free people with their small farms and their small shops who are part of the community dependent on others. So there's an economic basis to the spirit of liberty, but also, in the next slide, the spirit of liberty is also bound up in the development of local self-government. And here's de Tocqueville. He was a fascinating guy, very involved in anti-slavery movements. He was a minister in the Second French Republic, established in the Revolution of 1848. He was foreign minister. Um, but he came to America in the 1830s, and his two-volume book, Democracy in America, is about how the institutions of local government in North America, really in New England, promote self-interest properly understood, where you saw your interests bound up in the community's well-being. He did not say because it was part of the air one breathed. Fish don't think about water. De Tocqueville did not think about the widespread distribution of property, but that was essential for the success of the local government institutions that taught people, through participation in these, taught people to respect other people and to work together. And so much of this is lost. Even in my town of Amherst, we don't have town meeting anymore. We've got a few people running things, but okay. The United States is much worse than Amherst still. Okay, next slide. We've got a local government promoting spirit of liberty. Now, when it came time to write the Constitution, oops, I lost things again. Don't you love when the technology doesn't work for you? I don't want to exit full screen mode. I want to move to the next slide. There we go. Okay, widespread distribution of property. These numbers are remarkable. I mean, you look at these. England and Wales, the Gini coefficient around 0.6. The South, the Gini coefficient of 0.46. New England, Gini coefficient of 0.35. Much more even distribution of property. The share of wealth held by the top 1%, a quarter in the South. 3.5% in New England. New England had, and the middle colonies too, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, a much more even distribution of property, which made them, if you compared these with Latin America, it would be much closer to the South, something between the South and England and Wales, than New England and the middle colonies. The northern states in the United States, what became the basis of American democracy, where American democracy developed, had an incredibly, by world standards, an incredibly even distribution of property. Widespread property ownership was the basis for democracy as it developed in the United States. Okay, next slide. If we can get to it. We got the Constitution. We had the American Revolution. We had the period of relative political anarchy. But then we got a constitution drafted largely for purposes of restraining both types of democracy, both types of tyranny. The tyranny of a few people taking power and tyranny of a democratic majority, mob rule. Yeah. And the Constitution was largely drafted by this guy, James Madison, a Southerner. He designed the Constitution with institutions to prevent tyranny, tyranny of both a small group or an individual, and tyranny of a large group of people who form a faction and take power. His institutions sought to division of powers, judiciary, executive, legislature, to balance the self-interest of each institution against the others. Add to this a large and diverse country with varying interests and factions so that there'd be no single political party that would encompass the whole country and take over, and a civil service committed to public responsibility beyond individual administrations. All intended to reduce the danger of tyranny, including the possibility of mob rule. And we've had all of these have eroded dramatically in the last 60 years, especially under Trump, but even before Trump. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Progress and retreat, democracy and autocracy, back and forth. You get popular mobilization, you get a response by the rich. The way I show it here, popular mobilization's winning. Well, we always have the numbers, but they have the wealth, they have organization. It's easier to organize a relatively small group of the Davos clan, people who go to this conference in Davos, Switzerland, or wherever it is, and hang out there talking about great ideas. And, you know, they have the money. They can threaten to take their money and go home. They can hire people. So it's a back and forth. Now, generally speaking, rich people concentrate on just running their own business and spending their money to make themselves happy. But when threatened, they get together, they organize, and that's what tilts that seesaw in the other direction. Okay, and this is a pattern we've seen through American history. If we go to the next slide, we have democracy is inherently people don't think about this so much, but democracy is inherently a challenge to capitalism because democracy allocates power on an equal basis. One person, maybe one white male, later one person, one vote, rather than wealth. World War II was a seminal event in this because the Allies, the United States and Britain at least, and the Soviet Union kind of played along. The Allies fought the war against tyrants who were supported by the capitalist class, against the rich people in Germany and Italy. Popular movements developed, demanded, expanded democratic rights, challenging capitalist power. And then as we went along, the capitalists respond. This is a back and forth that we see repeatedly in American history. And we'll run quickly through some of these as quickly as the slides progress. This alternating conflict, advance, retreat, slavery and abolition, the progressive era, New Deal to World War II, and then the Civil Rights Campaign. Which was ended with counterattacks by Southern white elites and business elites. And that's where we really start to see the basis laid for Trump's attack on democracy. Okay. Next we move on to slavery and abolition. I mean, look at this. This was actually voted in the United States, and it's part of our Constitution. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Oh my God, if the Republicans could get rid of that. They're working at it. I mean, Trump has actually signed an executive order, as you've probably heard, refusing citizenship to people born in the United States. I mean, it's like right out there. I would think even this Supreme Court will not go along with that, but who knows? This equal protection clause has been the base of progressive jurisdiction for 100 years. It's on that basis that segregation was outlawed in the South. It's on that basis, on the basis of that equal protection, that gay people gained the right to marry. This is one of the most radical documents in human history, written into the Constitution of the United States. How did that happen? It happened because of the anti-slavery movement, which led to a war. Do you know that as more people died, go to the next slide, more people died in the United States during our Civil War, a war fought to overturn slavery, than died in all of our other wars put together. Okay, let's see. Moving to the next slide. I still don't know how to do this. Someday I'll learn. Okay. Campaign for abolition. Even at the beginning, I mean, it became in the course of the war. Wars radicalize people in ways that you don't expect. When you have to get everybody involved, you have to offer something to everybody. We saw this in Britain during World War II, where the British government put out this beverage report promising unemployment benefits, a campaign against unemployment, welfare benefits, and a national health service, all to mobilize the whole country for the war. Same in the United States. Women's rights came out of the abolition movement, the campaign against slavery. Labor rights, campaign for a 10-hour day minimum wages to support unions. During the war, the United States government enacted a progressive income tax to make the rich pay for the war, offered free land to settlers, free land. I mean, it was land stolen from the native peoples, but okay, we're going to forget about that. And free land to the freed slaves. Also, something that people don't talk about enough. All the expansion of the continental United States came under slavery. We stopped taking land from Mexico, from Canada, after the end of slavery. Slavery was an expansive system. If the slave owners had had their way, they would have taken the rest of Mexico. Remember, we had an army in Mexico City in 1846. They would have taken the rest of Mexico. They would have taken Cuba. Yeah, we did take Puerto Rico, and we've kept it. Oh, well. And we took the Philippines from Spain, but we gave that back. Actually, that was the U.S. freeing of the Philippines was the first European colony that was freed. But slavery was the driving force in American military aggression. We're going to come back to that because with the rise of the autocrats, the descendants of the slave owners, the United States is embarking on an incredibly dangerous, destructive, militaristic foreign policy, as was mentioned without the possible invasion of Venezuela. Why are we going to go to war in Venezuela? I don't know. Okay, next slide. So, campaign for abolition encompassed a much broader idea of equal rights. And while abolition survived barely, the expansion of equal rights to women, to workers, to blacks brought on a reaction. This is the back and forth I was talking about. The defeat of Reconstruction involved the restoration of elite white rule in the South, basically by the large landowners who survived the Civil War. And much more. It was led, this campaign to put the genie of democracy back in the bottle. It was led by the least democratic branch of the US government, the Supreme Court, which was before the Civil War was almost, nobody noticed it. Then in 1857, it had the famous Dred Scott decision where suddenly out of the blue it said a black man has no rights that a white man needs to respect. And states cannot restrict slavery. In 1883, it overturned the Civil Rights Act, and it went on from there. The court took the lead in the counterattack against democracy and equal rights. Okay, so that was the defeat of Reconstruction. There's a book by Heather Cox Richardson, used to be a colleague of mine at UMass History, and now she's a very popular podcaster and blogger. Oh wait, no, it's not Heather Cox Richardson. It's anyway, about the destruction of the Second American Republic, which was the republic established in the Civil War era, and overturned with the destruction of Reconstruction, led by the Supreme Court. Okay, moving on, we get the next period of social progress. If I can, what happens if I click that? Nothing. Click that? Nothing. I don't seem to have control over this. I'm sure there's a way that I could do it, but technology. Well, if you can move to the next slide. Progressive era after 1900. Ironically, after the Spanish-American War, the short little war where the United States moved onto the world stage and stole Cuba, well, temporarily stole Cuba. Then we freed it under some conditions, and including that they let us keep Guantanamo Bay, so we could, well, you know what we did there. Okay, but then we had Progressive Era and Retreat, 8-hour day, union protection was enacted, an income tax. We finally got an income tax again. It required an amendment to the Constitution because the Supreme Court had thrown out the Civil War income tax. Popular election of senators, breaking up of monopolies, and right away, did not take very long. The Supreme Court led the attack. Lochner versus New York overturned a 10-hour day law on the grounds that people should have the right to contract to work longer hours, if that's what they want to do. When I went through this with my wife, she said, so they think people should have the right to contract to sell themselves into slavery, which ironically was a question that was brought up in my defense in graduate school. You know, Professor Leibenstein asked. Okay, then there was Hodges v. overturning anti-discrimination laws intended to protect blacks. The Supreme Court, the least democratic branch in the U.S. government, led the way against measures to promote equality. Okay. Then coming out of that, we got this huge rise in inequality in the 1920s, with cuts and reductions in the income tax, deregulation, swing back and forth again. Okay, next one. Oh, and upsurge and lynching in the South to put blacks in their place. My dog is doing something. Corduroy, stop that. Okay, next slide, please. New Deal. The Wagner Act during the election of Franklin Roosevelt. The Wagner Act in 1935 protected unions, Social Security Act in 1935, led by the first woman to serve in the cabinet of the United States, Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins, who grew up around here and went to school at Mount Holyoke. The Atlantic Charter was brought up by independence leaders in India. Nehru, Gandhi cited the Atlantic Charter, independence leaders in the Philippines, and throughout the world. A peace, all nations dwelling in safety within their own borders, of freedom from want, fear, and want. Franklin Roosevelt, in his 1944 State of the Union address, proposed an economic Bill of Rights, which would have included a right to housing, a right to health care. We still have ways to go in this country. But you could almost say that that was the high watermark of that period of reform. And it was followed by the next period of capitalist-led right-wing counterattack, which we'll get to in the next slide. I wonder if I could. Nope, I can't seem to get control. Okay. Excuse me, what is my dog doing? Corduroy, come on, over here. I think he found a bag and he's packing the bag. Okay, anti-union legislation, most prominently the Taft-Hartley Act, which helped roll back unions. Unions had kind of reached a high watermark in the late 1940s, organizing steel, autos, and others, and attacks on left-wing views in the media and universities, led by Senator Joseph McCarthy and somebody will come back, Richard Nixon. Attacks on the First Amendment right to free speech, attacks on the 14th Amendment right to equal protection. But that counteroffensive was relatively weak. And we move on to the next slide. Okay, that's my wife. Move on to the next slide. The Civil Rights Campaign, which the Civil Rights Movement was unusual in that it was sparked by Supreme Court measures, the Brown versus Board of Education decision, but it also involved a huge mobilization of people, blacks in the South, but also trade unionists, white clergymen, women, and it spawned a feminist movement and a gay rights movement and other progressive movements, all demanding the same thing, equal rights and a right to personal autonomy. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Here's the 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. The march was financed by the United Auto Workers. And at the front rank with King were white, Hispanic, and black clergymen, Catholic Church leaders, Jewish leaders, leaders of the various Protestant denominations. And if you look here, you see women marching with men. Many of those women would go on to lead the feminist movement that rose up in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement. And probably some of those people are gay. I don't know, but Stonewall, which kind of kicked off the defense against police brutality, came up just a few years after this march. Okay, next slide. Challenge of marriage and sexuality. Loving versus Virginia. Removed bars on interracial marriages, which are now much more common. And one reason young people in the United States are much more progressive than their elders, especially on gender and sexuality issues, is because so many of them are themselves the product of these interracial marriages. And Obergefell v. Hodges. Oh, that should be 2015. Sorry, not 1915. That removed bars on same-sex marriage. The Supreme Court, as reactionary as it is, they wouldn't overturn that. They had a chance last 2 weeks ago. Okay, next slide. Return of the strike. You see this sharp, there's that spike in strike activity right after World War II. But then, it kind of drops down, and there were these two Princeton labor economists, Ross and Hartman, wrote a very widely read book, The Withering Away of the Strike. I think that's not the title. That's the title of the chapter. I think the book's called Labor Relations, something boring. But the idea was we don't have strikes anymore. Well, came back. 1971 was a very big strike year. It involved the post office. There was unionization moves among the U.S. military. One reason we gave up on our war in Vietnam is because our soldiers wouldn't fight. And they were talking about forming unions, protecting themselves against abuse. I mean, the country was changing in dramatic ways that were threatening people in power. Agricultural workers were organizing. Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers. One of my first political actions was organizing the lettuce boycott. Okay, next. Because we start getting the reaction. U.S. was becoming much more democratic and egalitarian. Inequality fell. The top income, 1% income share, bottomed out in the late 1970s. Unionization peaked, came to another peak with organization of public sector workers, relatively high income tax rates. Those rates peaked in the early 1970s, and the anti-war movement. The United States was changing. Civil rights legislation. When I was growing up, Jews couldn't live in most of the suburbs of New York where I was because of restrictive covenants. The Civil Rights Law of 1968 banned those covenants, allowing Blacks, Hispanics, and Jews to move to neighborhoods where they'd never been allowed to buy houses or move to before. Union organization spread, income taxes. Okay. The environmental movement, 1971 was the first Earth Day, and major clean water and clean air legislation was passed. OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, was established. Sending people into workplaces to make sure that they were healthy and that chemicals were not like asbestos. I mean, we had thousands of people who died of asbestos poisoning in the 1950s and 60s. No longer. So we became a much better country and a much more peaceful one. It was nice. I mean, not exactly French Revolutionary nice, but it was real progress. Medicare and Medicaid were enacted to give access to health care to the elderly and to poor people. Okay, next. Because we're going to start getting a reaction. First, the organized labor, Democratic Party opened to non-whites. Southern Democrats realized they could only win with Black votes. That's Thurgood Marshall swearing in Andrew Young as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Thurgood Marshall had been the lawyer for the NAACP arguing against segregated schools. He became a member of the Supreme Court. He would be replaced in 1989 by Clarence Thomas. Wow. You go from one of the best people to one of the worst. Okay, next slide. We have President Carter. We don't desire to be the world's policeman anymore. Wow, wouldn't that be something? Gave up on that pretty quickly. Move to the next slide. And not everybody was so enthusiastic about this. Next slide. Because we're getting the counterattack. Lewis Powell, who went on just the next year to be a member of the Supreme Court, and the Trilateral Commission. The effective operation of a democratic system requires some measure of apathy or non-involvement. Marginal social groups are overloading the political system. And Powell, no thoughtful person can question that our economic system is under broad attack. So what are you going to do about it? Powell had a program. He told business, this was a memo that he wrote to the Chamber of Commerce. The Trilateral Commission was made up of was financed by some of the richest people in the world. And what was their program? Get business involved in the universities and media. We'll get to the next slide. We'll see how that's coming. Yeah. If we can get to the next slide. Yeah. No. There we go. Use money where votes may be hard to find. Promote pro-capitalist social sciences by pressuring universities. Advertise to get newspapers and television to present pro-capitalist views, or just buy the papers like the New York Post. Establish Fox News. Use the courts. It's all about protecting business from popular democracy. Limit the power of elected officials to enact progressive legislation. And maybe wage some wars. When Reagan came in 1981, one of the first things he did was invade Grenada, this little island. And then George H.W. Bush invaded Panama. Whatever problems I have with Jimmy Carter, he wasn't doing any of those things. Okay, next slide. Yes, here's the dog. Attack alternative ideas in education. My Department of Economics was actually founded by Sam Bowles and others who were denied tenure because of their radical views. They were able to move them all to UMass Amherst, establish the radical program there. I encourage you all to think about going to UMass in graduate school. While purging some, a Nobel Prize went to Milton Friedman, no relation. Nobel for Buchanan, James Buchanan, named after the President of the United States before Lincoln, the pro-slavery president. He helped draft the Pinochet Constitution for Chile after the United States helped overthrow the democratic government of Chile. Okay, next slide. Nothing more about Buchanan. Attack organized labor. Reagan came into office and right away fired striking public sector workers. Tax cuts. And you see this. The top income share goes up while the unionization rate goes down. I mean, there you have the class war, and they are winning. Okay, next slide. Because there's more than just that. There's liberate money in politics, limit popular democracy. The Supreme Court, Powell in the majority, found political money as protected speech. So you can't restrict what people spend in elections. And then Citizens United, built on the Buckley decision, you can't restrict what corporations spend because corporations are people just like you and me and have a right to free speech and free trade deals um, designed to reduce local or even national control over business. So you can't regulate toxins in milk or whatever, because those are involved in international trade. And so local governments can't do anything about it. Limit popular democracy. You see where we're going. Trump brings in an autocracy, but we were already getting one. Okay, next slide. Yeah. The ultra-rich use their money to buy elected officials. 100 years ago, Louis Brandeis said we can have a democracy or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. Federal election donations. Last year, the 100 wealthiest Americans spent $1 billion buying. Not all of them gave their money to Trump. Most of them gave money to Trump. There were a few who gave money to Harris and the Democrats, but mostly they gave money to Trump and Republicans. And they were buying an election. Look at that change in just a decade. 10 years ago, these people were spending $250 million. Now it's $1 billion. Okay, inflation is part of it, but it's not all. Okay, next slide. As the rich are buying their politics, seeding the ground for Trump. Okay, next slide. And, there are effects here. Economic policy since the 1970s has favored a few people, especially educated people in urban areas, mostly on the coasts. I do well with my PhD. Half of our graduate students are foreign, so we make money off of foreign trade. I have cousins, nephews working in Hollywood and high tech, exporting products all over the world. But those in especially rural areas, manufacturing communities, competing with foreign suppliers, they lose with foreign trade. And they've lost because they don't have unions. I still have a union in the University of Massachusetts. But private sector unionism has almost disappeared. So what happens? People lose jobs, they lose wages, they lose a say in managing their work, and these people are angry. And they disproportionately vote MAGA for Trump because they feel they are getting screwed, while other people are flourishing. Okay, next slide. Deregulation of business has come at the expense of workers and the public, even while Facebook and Google are flourishing, virtually without regulation because they bought freedom from regulation from Trump. Shifting the cost of business profits onto regular people and communities. People are losing out, and they're angry about it. Next slide. And they blame somebody. Now, some people are doing better. Women have continued to gain. They kind of maxed out about 20 years ago, but they gained a lot. Men have been losing, mostly, not me, blue collar, less educated. And they look at who's gaining. Women are gaining. Blacks are gaining. That's not entirely true, but there's some truth in it. Immigrants, got to blame somebody. Jews. Jews have become, we dominate the industries that are doing well. Higher education, finance, business services, high tech, Hollywood. While white males are falling behind, they blame others. They call them line jumpers. That's a phrase that's some Mexican Americans in the United States complain about people who cross the border without going through the regular process. They're line jumpers. They're getting ahead of us. Well, I waited in line all this time. You hear that. Some of those people vote for Trump. But generally, white, less educated males feel they're losing out. They're losing control of their communities. They're losing control of their jobs. They're losing, and they're mad about it. And they need somebody who's going to give voice to that anger, even if they're not quite sure that it's going to help them. So we get to the next slide. We get, well, some people have become fabulous. Oh, God. The billionaire wealth in the United States. Let's just go to the next slide. It's obscene how rich these people are. Elon Musk has about as much wealth as all of sub-Saharan Africa outside of South Africa. I mean, it's ridiculous. But okay, that's just my opinion. Okay, next slide. And American billionaires from the United States are doing very well. And they have as we said, they're using that wealth to buy elections. Okay, next slide, please. $2.7 trillion, 20 people. It's like, really. By the way, you look at them. They're nice enough to show the faces of them. 2 women, no blacks. Oh well, this guy Larry Ellison, he bought CBS News. Mark Zuckerberg is a detestable human being, but okay, just my opinion. Okay, next. Visual capitalist. I love that. US has, we're number one. We're number one. Now think about it. We have all these super rich people. What do they need? And we'll get to the next slide. They need a military to protect them, their wealth. I mean, they need police. And what's better than police in international relations? Aircraft carriers. Next slide, please. And the US, you probably know this, we spend as much as the next 10 countries in the world. I don't even see Mexico there. Yep. Russia's number 3. Okay, we need the most police to protect our rich. Not me. Oh, whatever. Okay, I don't know. I live in Amherst. We're a nice, peaceful place. The major dispute is occasionally people don't clean up after their dogs. We clean up after our dog. Okay, next slide. Communities disrupted by trade and deregulation. It's a little hard to tell in this, but who is it who serves in these militaries? Who is it who fights in our wars? Poor people. Blacks from urban areas, blacks from rural areas, whites from rural areas. Yeah. And that's a factor. These areas, especially those rural areas, voted very heavily for Trump. They have grievances. And Trump, he may not be meeting their grievance, but he's at least speaking to their anger. Next. Neoliberalism created the social and ideological basis for Trump. Rising inequality and the destruction of communities, wars of aggression staffed by volunteers. We have a volunteer army. Loss of control with the capitalist crackdown on workplaces. Their attitude for many people, next slide, is why not vote for Trump? Now, mind you, the right wing has a problem here, and they have an answer. The enemies of government, politicians, immigrants, women, blacks, just need to get rid of them all. The left, and Bernie Sanders, he had, to me, much more sensible solutions to these problems, but they're harder. Because what is he doing? Bernie and others are saying, we need more government. We need more politics at the very time that populace in these communities, these rural communities, these urban communities, are saying, feeling that they're left out of politics, and politics has failed them. Government has failed them. So the left says, war? That doesn't meet their frustrated politics of anger. Next slide. Trump famously said in 2016 in Harlem, a black neighborhood in northern New York, what do you have to lose? It's ridiculous. They had plenty to lose. But the response from many people has been democracy's failed. It's fault of immigrants, fault of lawn jumpers. Burn it all down. And MAGA feeds on those left behind, especially white males, but also other males and many women. Next slide. Trump would channel anger against anyone but the white male capitalist elite. I mean, his attacks on women, especially black women, but also white women. Attacks on blacks, attacks on immigrants. I mean, the attacks on all goes on and on. Okay, next slide. He learned. He was president before and he lost. So crush free speech, intimidate the media, purge the universities. Most of all, ignore the courts, encourage violence, and build a private police force, which is what Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, has become. This is his private Gestapo. And he sends it against local governments. Now, it doesn't mean that he's going to win, but there's a method to this, to what he's doing. Okay, next slide.
Sorry to interrupt, Professor. We have 10 more minutes.
Okay, well, let's see. Destroy the separation of powers. You get the point that what we have here in Trump is a reaction to what's gone on with neoliberalism, the sense that our democracy has failed, and Trump is moving in to destroy the democracy with the support of people who feel that it's already failed. So we'll stop there, and I'm open to questions. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. Purge the civil service, etc. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was very, very interesting. I will open the space. If anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, please raise its hand. Otherwise, I will make a few points about your presentation that I found really interesting and ask you a question. Karl Marx used to say that America was destined to become the new economic powerhouse of the world because it didn't have all the aristocratic feudal relationships. It was founded by English people that came without this institutional baggage, let's say. However, with your talk, I realized how very quickly new forms of oppression were built around the idea of slavery. You were saying that America was built to promote slavery, basically. I had never thought in that way about America, but it's a very interesting idea that maybe is worthwhile addressing a little bit more. Another idea that I found very interesting about your talk is this relationship between democracy and the democratization of the means of production. And why is this important? Because as economists, we need to promote the redistribution of income, not only because in that way we can promote our society from an economic standpoint, but also because that's the basis of democracy. And you said very, very well, like if you don't have means of production, if you don't have property, you need to work for somebody else. And that's where these tyrannical, oppressive relationships inside the firm start happening. And that has repercussions over society. So in that point, in that regards, one question will be, how do you see this matter of redistribution of property in the times that we're living? Because as you stressed during your presentation, wealth has become more concentrated than ever before. And by its own logic, capital accumulation will keep reproducing this inequality. So we're facing a world in which one, capital is getting more centralized, but also inequality is rising, and by its own logic, it will keep rising. So the basis, the material basis for democracy is being eroded on a daily basis. You stress also about Elon Musk. He will become the first trillionaire in history very soon, and that will keep rising and rising. And finally, one last question I have for you is how artificial intelligence is going to undermine the labor movement and the democratic movements, because this technology could be very powerful to free society from work and to promote social well-being, etc., etc. But in the hands of capitalists, that's it used to cut production costs. What we will see is that many people will be fired and many jobs will be displaced by this new technology. So the basis for building democratic movements seem to be also undermined, not only by decentralization of property, but by technological changes that are displacing workers and are rising the insecurity of work and are rising fear. So we may be facing a politics of fear that will undermine any basis for building a democratic socialist movement that asks for redistribution, social rights, etc. So that will be my participation, Professor. Thank you once again more. And I don't know if
Well,
you can elaborate on these ideas.
well, thank you for that uh, deeply disturbing picture of our future. You're absolutely right on every point that our rising inequality endangers the very basis of democratic governance. The loss of democratic governance means that technologies like artificial intelligence will increasingly be used against workers rather than for workers. Um, you go to an Amazon warehouse and workers are already, they hold on to these things, that digital devices that tell them where to go and what to do. Um, Delivery services and truck drivers are monitored at all times. AI can be used against us, against regular people. And that's what's going to happen if we let the rich use their money to buy our politics. Um, by contrast, which would basically be, what would the world be like? What would the United States be like if the South had won the Civil War and conquered the North and imposed slavery across the whole country, which was very possible in 1860. It was very possible that the United States would have become a completely slave society, and a few rich people would control everything. That's the direction we're moving in. Um, uh, it's also very possible that Nazi Germany and fascist Italy would have won and imposed their racist, authoritarian system through the whole world. These are dangers that we faced before, and people organized, fought back, and defeated these threats to our liberty. I would hope that that's what we'll do. The way to do it is by organizing, working together, discovering that Tocquevillian love of liberty, and building organization to fight back. What we're seeing now in the United States, we are seeing some of that. And so that gives me certain hope. Um, The baristas in Starbucks have gone on strike. Teaching assistants and research assistants in the University of California, after 14 months, won a contract. The people in Portland, in Charlotte, in Chicago are finding ways to fight back against, and other places, I don't want to slight LA or other places, are finding ways to strike back, to fight back against ICE and against invasions of their community and kidnapping of their people. They passing out these whistles made, by computers, in 3D projectors. They were using apps that were being sold on the Apple Store. The government made them Apple take them down, but I'm sure people have found other ways to share these apps where you could report when you've seen an ICE person, people from ICE. So people are finding ways to fight back, and in the process, they are organizing themselves and finding self-interest properly understood. And that feeling is moving into politics. Now, I don't know that we will be able to defeat Trump just because we defeated the slave owners and defeated Hitler. And in Mexican history, you have successful popular movements that we can look to as well. But it is possible. It won't happen unless we work at it, unless we work together. But if we do, we can take this artificial intelligence and these other technologies and use them to shorten the workday, make work more pleasant, develop our artistic selves, and fight climate change. We could do that, or we could let the rich run everything and they'll destroy the planet, while setting us all against each other. So I don't know if I really answered the question particularly, but I talked. I gave my hope.
No, yes, it was. Sorry, was a very interesting answer, Professor. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
want to ask the audience if somebody else has a question. We have two questions here in Cancun, Professor. We have people from UNAM and people from University Anáhuac, which is a private university in Cancun. So two people raise their hands. One of them is a student from Venezuela. I will leave him talk.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you fine. Thank you.
It's good. I just want to ask, do you think personally it would have been much better with Kamala if she had won?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, for all the problems I have with corporate Democrats, quote unquote, and certainly with neoliberals, the Biden administration was the most progressive administration, domestic policy in the United States since Roosevelt. I think Kamala would have been a little bit more progressive than Biden himself. If Kamala was president, we wouldn't be sending an aircraft carrier against Venezuela. There's some things, there are issues with trade, issues with the border, all sorts of problems, but ICE would not be invading communities. They would not be separating children from parents. I mean, there are just some ghastly, awful things going on in this country that make me deeply ashamed. And the worst of them would not be happening. We would be pushing to move healthcare a little bit in the right direction. I think that Kamala would have been a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Professor, now Ashley, who is from Cuba, will ask you another question.
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, you're fine. Thank you.
I have a question regarding immigration. I want to know your thoughts about Donald Trump taking out of the country undocumented immigrants, how does this affect the economy of the United States based on that most of the people that went there, they have like an impact on the labor supply? I would like to know what you think about that, and how does the deportation of these immigrants affect the economy of the United States?
Well, if they were deporting large numbers, then it would have a terrible effect on our agriculture, our construction, and domestic industries. By domestic, I mean personal service. A very large share, something on the order of 22% of construction workers are undocumented. And more than that are in agriculture. The people who pick the crops, the people who work in the hot sun are mostly undocumented, or they are documented immigrants. In New England, our apples are picked by documented immigrants who regularly come over from Jamaica. We have a regular flow back and forth of Jamaicans who come to pick our crops in New England, and then they go back. It's been going on for 80 years. So if they really did, I mean, they haven't actually thrown that many undocumented immigrants out. It's been more talk. But if they did, then it would be a major problem in our agriculture, and who would take care of the elderly in nursing homes? I mean, these are all the immigrants, and wherever you have a lot of immigrants, you have a lot of undocumented. The bigger effect is in scaring people away from coming to the United States. And they've been very effective at just closing the border, not letting people cross at all, which in the long run will drive up prices. It will mean that we're not going to get strawberries out of season for New England, because nobody will be picking them in Florida. People will not be building houses because they don't have workers. I mean, over time, it will undermine some of these basic industries. The place where the administration has been more effective has actually been at the upper end of the labor market, by keeping out graduate students, by the number of foreign students in American universities is down by 17% this year. Our high-tech industries and our biotech industries are losing out to Europe, to China, because we're not getting the smartest people that we would have been getting otherwise. And in fact, there's a growing exodus of American scientists from the Boston area, from San Francisco Bay to Europe especially. French companies are poaching some of our top talent from Harvard, MIT, and other schools because they can't get graduate students. They can't get funding from this anti-intellectual government. So in the long run, the effects will be higher inflation, lower economic output, and worse conditions for Americans, and slower productivity growth. It's like, come on, Americans are going to get what they deserve. We elected Trump, and now we're all going to become poor, hungry, and won't be cared for in our old age.
Yes, but the problem, Professor, is that we did not elect Trump,
Oh God,
suffering
no.
the consequences for
No. Mexico, Canada, in fact, the whole rest of the world, it's like sleeping next to an elephant. And when the elephant rolls over, watch out.
We're scared. We're scared. There are many things that worries us. A military intervention, of course, the trade and tariffs stuff. There are
The
plenty of
U.S.
things.
military landed in Mexico last week, seized the beachfront area, posted signs in English and Spanish telling people that this is a U.S. military place, and then we left. What was that about? A warning? You
We
know?
have we have another participation, Professor,
Yeah.
from a student called Arelis. She's from Ecuador.
Mhm.
So I will give her the word.
Good afternoon, Professor. As the Mister said, I'm from Ecuador, so I had like a question, like, what are your thoughts regarding like these Latin American governments that are like kind of aligned with Trump's vision, or not necessarily vision, but try to apply or do like what Trump says in order to like make sure they got loans or like trade agreements that at the end of the day, for example, benefits or exports, but for like acquiring them, governments in this case, for example, in my case, Ecuador is applying neoliberalism like neoliberalism policies. So what are your thoughts about that? Like, you think that, how do you think that these things could affect in the long term to the countries, and what could we do like as citizens in order to like promote welfare in the long term?
Oh, it's a very good question. Thank you. And a very scary thought. Uh, there's a lot of scary thinking going on. What are you going to do? I mean, the United States is the big bully in the world. We control international financial institutions. We dominate world trade still. Um, and there are also, as we've found through the last 70 years, there are local elites who are very happy to do what corporate America says, for their own reasons. In 1973, September 11th, the coup in Chile. Yeah, the CIA and ITT and other U.S. companies helped fund it, but there were local people who did it. And there are always local people who are happy to improve their own position in their own country by allying with the United States. Plus, if you have to deal with the world's bully, one approach is to, if you're small and weak, relatively small and weak, is to do what they say and hope that they won't hit you. Switzerland, a country in a much better position than Ecuador, much wealthier, in one of the richest countries in the world, with a very strong position in international finance. Switzerland bought from Trump trade privileges by giving him a gold bar with his name on it and a Rolex watch. I mean, it's like, okay, if Ecuador could get away with doing that, and get the United States to leave it alone, then, oh, that would be wonderful. But I don't think so. It's, damn it. We're all, the whole world is waiting for the United States to come to its senses. And if it doesn't, how will we address problems of climate change, global poverty, disease, if the United States is behaving like this? I'm sorry. I really wish, you know, we're going to have to make it through the next couple of years and just hope that politics here turns around. Until then, keep your head down. Hope that Trump doesn't notice you. That's
Until then, you are very much welcome in Cancun, Professor. You will have a great time here with the sun and the beach, and.
Oh, yes. My
And
daughter
related
lived
with-
in southern
related with-
Mexico for a few years, in
Oh, that's-
Oaxaca, at Mazunte.
Oaxaca, yes, you told me.
Yeah.
Well, feel very welcome, please, to come whenever you want.
Well, Thank you. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Professor.
Mhm.
It has been an extremely illustrative talk about the history, about how Trump came to be. It's not something that happened 3 years ago. It's something that has been evolving since the inception, it's aim of the United States as a free nation. My promise is to ask for your syllabus on the course you teach on American history, to share it with the students here, with the students of UNAM. I'm
Oh,
sure that they will be very interested into learning more about the history of the United States
mhm.
and how this country that is the hegemon in the world came and assumed the shape it has and the ideology it has, the economics it has. So I will write you an email later asking for this syllabus. I will share it with all the students. They will be very happy to check it out. And we want to really, really thank you for your time, for your generosity. Here at Anagua Cancun, we don't have this type of talks. To be honest, it's not normal to have professors with your ideological orientation and your knowledge,
Mhm.
So we're very grateful, professors. Thank you very much. And
Well,
well,
thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed this and
thank you. We
appreciate
enjoyed
your
it.
patience. Okay.
No, thank you, professor. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.